South Korea has long been one of the United States' biggest economic and military partners. The alliance that the two hold is well known and was forged during the Korean War. Over time, the US continued to be a vital economic link. They provided development aid, technological support, and access to global markets during its post-war rebuilding phase. Here's a graph on the direct investments abroad in South Korea from the US. Here you can see since 1982, US investments have grown tremendously. Back in 1982, the investment stood at only $690 million. But by 2023, it has risen to a massive $35 billion. Here's another graph on the US assistance to South Korea from 1946 to 1976, just to showcase how much the United States supported South Korea during its economic miracle years. Here you can see that in total, the US provided both military and economic assistance of over $12.59 billion. To put it in simpler words, there has been no other economic partner to South Korea that has provided such substantial and sustained support as the United States. But over the past few years, China has emerged to become Asia's largest economy. The country's economic growth made the country become much more important than any other for South Korea. It has, in just a couple of years, overtaken the United States. Yes, that's right. China is now the biggest economic partner to South Korea. Even though the US played a historical role in the development of South Korea, and even though it has contributed billions of investment and aid, China has now become the biggest and most important partner to South Korea. How so? Well, it lies in the concept of international trade. What is international trade? Well, international trade refers to the exchange of goods, services, and capital between countries. But that may not make sense, so let's simplify it. International trade has two important branches: exports and imports. Exports are when a country sells something to another. For instance, South Korea would sell electronic products like Samsung phones or automotive cars like Hyundai to China. When they sell them from South Korea to China, this is then registered as an export. Likewise, imports are when South Korea buys something from China. They could buy raw materials like steel or oil. They could also buy electronic products or automotive cars, just different brands like Xiaomi or emerging Chinese EV brand BYD. This exchange of goods is then what is known as international trade. Now, it is in this concept of international trade that China has overtaken the United States. Here's a graph on the largest export destination of South Korea back in the year 2000. In that year, South Korea exported over $181 billion, and 21%, or $38.9 billion, was exported to the United States. This made the United States the biggest export market for South Korea. 10 years later, by 2010, however, China had immediately taken up the spot from the US. Here, as you can see from this updated graph, South Korea's export for that year was over $483 billion, and over 24.3% of the exports, or $117 billion, went to China, while only 10.4%, or $50.2 billion, went to the US. By 2022, China still stood as the largest export market for South Korea, taking 21.2% of the share of their total $705 billion export for that year. Likewise, China may be the biggest export market for South Korea. They are also the biggest import destination. Here's a graph on South Korea's biggest import partners for 2022. Here, you can see that for the year 2022, South Korea imported over $666 billion worth of goods, and 22.6% of it was from China, amounting to over $150 billion. What this basically means is that China is the biggest trading partner for South Korea. There are more goods flowing between the two nations, whether that be phones, cars, semiconductors, petroleum, agricultural products, and so on. So, why is being the largest trading partner so important? Does it enable China to become the largest economic partner to South Korea as compared to the US? Well, the reason lies in the scale and depth of economic interdependence that trade partnerships bring. When a country becomes a major trading partner, it doesn't just facilitate the exchange of goods. It establishes economic ties that influence industries, employment, and even policy decisions. For South Korea, its relationship with China has translated into significant benefits in terms of market access, supply chain integration, and export-driven growth. China's role as South Korea's largest trading partner allows it to wield substantial economic influence. For example, with China accounting for over a quarter of South Korea's exports, sectors like semiconductors, automobiles, and chemicals have become heavily reliant on Chinese demand. Any fluctuation in China's economy, such as a slowdown, directly impacts South Korea's economic performance. Then, there's also the supply chain integration. South Korea and China are deeply embedded in global supply chains. South Korean companies like Samsung and Hyundai have plants in China. Samsung would then export certain components like semiconductors to China, where they are integrated into finished products such as smartphones, laptops, and other electronics. These products are then either consumed domestically in China or re-exported to global markets. Although some plants have relocated or closed already, some are still there producing Samsung products to this very day. This integration has cemented China's role as an indispensable partner. China's role can then be damaged or even possibly be influenced. This is where the challenges that South Korea faces due to its increasing reliance on China. Back in 2016 to 2017, economic ties were strained when the United States deployed a THAAD missile defense system in South Korea to guard against North Korean threats. China voiced strong objections, viewing it as a security risk. In response, Chinese authorities and segments of the public initiated what many perceived to be a boycott-like response to South Korean products and businesses. Lotte Group, a major South Korean retailer, faced severe operational difficulties in China, and sales of Hyundai cars took a hit. Here's a graph on the sales of Hyundai motors to China. Here you can see that in 2016 they sold more than 1 million units, but just a year later their sales dropped massively, and since then it hasn't recovered. The tourism sector also suffered when Chinese tour groups were discouraged from visiting South Korea. Estimates from the Korea Tourism Organization indicated that South Korea lost several million Chinese tourists in 2017, resulting in a sharp decline in revenue for hotels, duty-free shops, and other tourism-related businesses. Here's a graph on the Chinese travelers to South Korea. Here you can see that from 2015 to 2016, Chinese travelers have continuously gone up. But on March 2, 2017, China stated that it would ban group travel to South Korea in response to South Korea deploying the US THAAD missile system. After that occurred, you could see in the graph right here a huge drop in travel. In March of 2017, it saw a decline of 40%. Then further decline was seen in April with 66.6%. Although tensions gradually cooled, the THAAD episode sent an unmistakable message. China's vast economic leverage could be deployed as a political instrument. This remains a significant concern for policymakers in Seoul. And that's not the only way China could harm South Korea's economy. As we saw in recent years, there has been an increasing issue with the intensifying rivalry between the United States and China. South Korea is a long-standing US ally, hosting tens of thousands of American troops, and relies on Washington for security guarantees, especially in light of North Korea's nuclear ambitions. However, South Korea's economic well-being is increasingly tied to China. Balancing these twin priorities can be precarious. If the US moves to restrict technology transfers to China, as evidenced by semiconductor export controls, South Korean companies could be caught in the crossfire, forced to choose between compliance with US regulations and the lucrative Chinese market. This wedge places South Korean policymakers and conglomerates in a difficult position, one that will likely persist and intensify. This is arguably the most important factor that may change the South Korea-China economic partnership in the coming years. Semiconductors. Semiconductors have become the backbone of modern technology, powering everything from smartphones and laptops to electric vehicles and artificial intelligence systems. And it is well known that South Korea's Samsung is a leader in advanced semiconductor manufacturing. But Washington has asked Seoul to align with its policies aimed at limiting China's access to advanced semiconductor technologies. This request is part of a broader US strategy to counter China's technological and economic rise, particularly in industries with potential military applications. This could then invoke a retaliatory response from China, potentially straining the economic partnership between the two nations. They may again use the same retaliatory policies that were initiated back during the THAAD deployment, or they could do something else, maybe even worse. Semiconductors are necessary for China's future economy, and the possibility of them using such policies to ensure that they get what they want is highly likely. One possibility is the restriction of exports of rare mineral exports like gallium and germanium. These materials were actually banned from being exported to the United States from China. This was, as many news reports stated, a response to American restrictions on the Chinese chip-making industry. But what are gallium and germanium? Well, they are critical rare materials used in the manufacturing of advanced semiconductors and other high-tech products. Gallium is a key component in the production of gallium arsenide, GaS, and gallium nitride, GaN, which are essential for high-frequency and high-power applications like 5G networks, radar systems, and optoelectronics. Germanium, on the other hand, is widely used in fiber optics, infrared imaging, and certain semiconductor processes. Together, these materials play an indispensable role in enabling the high-performance technologies that power modern industries. Hence, as you can see, South Korea's remarkable economic transformation is intertwined with its robust trade ties to China. But this has become a vulnerability for the Korean economy. Heavy dependence on a single market places South Korea at the mercy of Chinese consumer sentiment, regulatory shifts, and broader geopolitical tensions. But anyway, do let us know what you think. Thanks for watching.